But they do know there's lots of water in our solar
You
system.
mean Moses with the flood?
No, excuse me.
Noah.
Noah and the flood. Sorry. I always get those two mixed up.
Both have beards.
They both have beards. There's lots of water in our solar system. And they know this absolutely for sure when they studied Halley's Comet back in '86. They sent probes out to the comet. And they observed this peanut-shaped core of Halley's Comet gushing out water. Tons of water, 80 to 100 tons a minute of water gushing out from this comet. That's where that's where the beard or the tail of the comet comes from. Is water. It's all water vapor. Now, if such a comet or such a planet is composed of so much water and ice, and it nears our Earth, and it enters our atmosphere, it's going to rain. And it's going to rain and rain and rain. Read the writing in the Revelation, and read the writing throughout the Old Testament according to what the judgment day is like, the day of our Lord. What's accompanied with all of those signs? Falling stars, floods, plagues, meteors crashing through the skies, hitting the ocean, causing more floods, the islands and mountains moving out of their places, the sun turning black as sackcloth, the moon turns blood red. The sun, in fact, Jesus said, at this time, in this generation, all these things that you see, that we've talked about, he says, they'll take place in one generation. One generation means about within 40 years. Right? He says, all these things I've described will take place within 40 years. And you're going to see the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. Go back to Revelation. Another celestial wonder is seen in chapter 12. A great red dragon. The color red again. You know how many times the color red is mentioned in the Bible? Adam, the first man. The word means red earth. Moses, parting the Red Sea. There's, again, another symbol of a cleavage of water. You will also see numerous references to Lucifer, angel of light, that God throws down into the earth. This angel is also a devil. He's dark. He's almost like a god. He's right next to God's hand, but he's the devil, and he's angel of light. He's also called the morning star. What happens when we see a comet or something that is going to be a comet approach our skies? The first time we see it is in the morning. It's a morning star. And if it comes bright enough, it begins to be seen during the daytime. And in fact, in 2 Peter, there's a legend that when the Christ comes again, and the Christ and Judgment Day appear to happen at the same time in Scripture, that there will be seen a day star. And the only way that can happen is if an actual star enters our solar system, or there's a very, very large comet that's very bright. And other myths and legends indicate that this bright comet, bright sun, bright star is also named Lucifer. And because he challenged the eminence of the sun, or the one God, he was thrown down to earth. And that's what caused all these destructions. If you read about the legends in India, it talks about Kali Ma, the goddess who created everything and destroys everything. The Hopis talk about it. Many other myths and legends talk about the same thing. So the point I'm trying to make, the very mystical, ancient geometry and astronomy is based on this repeating event. And what I'm seeking in my research is to find out the time period of this event. I believe it is indicated in the Scriptures, and it's revealed through what John says about the number of the beast, describing of when the Christ returns, what's going to happen, and he uses lots of numbers, like 1,260 days. 40 and 2 months, 3.5 years, they're all the same number. And what's interesting, the way he says it, he describes a year that is 360 days long. Well, according to the Hebrews, they did not have a 360-day year. They had a year based on the lunar calendar, which was 354 days. And they had a very complicated system. For every 7 years, they would add a day or something like that, or a week. I think they would add it every 7 years to their calendar to keep the civil calendar equal with the solar calendar. So the times wouldn't slowly slip by, and after 200 or 300 years, April would be in March, or April would be in September. So it was a very complicated thing. It's mentioned in the time of Noah that the flood would last for 5 months, 150 days. That's 30-day months. Again, they're talking about a 12-month year of 30 days apiece. Now, scholars can't figure that out. One of the things that I think that was going on is the same thing the Egyptians did. The Egyptians had 3 calendars that ran simultaneously at the same time. They had a lunar calendar, a solar calendar, and a solar calendar of 365.25 days, which is what we have now, a lunar calendar, and the 360-day degree. 360-day calendar. They ran simultaneously. So apparently the priests used one calendar, the people used another calendar, and so on. I think the same thing happened in the ancient times. So that is the basis of my point. I don't want to go on too long about numbers because it's extremely complicated. My head is filled with numbers. I've been playing with them all morning, trying to show you simply what I'm trying to say. But I think the most interesting point of it all is the great precessional equinox of 12 months, possibly 12 planets in our solar system, relating to the week and relating to the cycle of this planet is the basis for sacred geometry. And it's something worth studying, because it is the basis for perhaps even the very cells that developed on this planet, that developed according to a formula which has been described as 6 by 6 by 6. Honeycombs are 6-sided, beehives are 6-sided, quartz crystals are 6-sided, and on and on and on. There was something that this wandering planet caused to the actual structure of our Earth and our bodies, which has also been called the beast, and its number is 606. There's something that is both physical, astronomical, and in the cellular structure. And I think Genesis talks about that. And I'm just at the beginning of my research, and hopefully within another year or two, we can get this on paper very clearly said, so that it is something the scientists want to look at and listen to. Because it may have to do with our very future. We could be living in the generation that Christ talked about.
That's my question, David. How does that relate to us today?
Well, what if we knew that this event would be happening within our lifetime, within the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Or in our children's generation, we knew for sure that this was coming. What does it mean? And it may mean a lot. It may mean that most of our Earth will be damaged. How will we deal with it spiritually? I mean, it's going to scare a lot of people if this is discovered for certain. How do we deal with it as teachers in trying to teach people? Do we want to teach doom and gloom? It's the thing that I've been wrestling with. I mean, what if I do discover it and we physically make identification of this object? We know it's coming. We've got 20 years. I mean,
What is it that you see happening? You see a planet colliding with us?
no, I think that there is probably a number of meteorites, and that it will pass very close to this planet, and it will actually cause the sun to turn black.
That's have you heard of what's his name, Alan Vaughan? Because that's his theory.
That there's a planet or...
Meteorite colliding with the sun.
Well, it may collide with the sun. I don't think it'll destroy the sun, but I think a very large object passing close to the sun could cause huge sunstorms, and sunstorms turn the surface of the sun black. And if it turns the surface of the sun black, the color that will be seen is the lower end of the spectrum, red. You see? And that would cause the moon to turn blood red. It's the only thing that would cause it to turn blood red.
How does your reconstruction of the early event catastrophe correlate with Velikovsky's theory?
He believes that Venus was the culprit, and that Venus and Mars together were somehow involved. I think that's close to the truth, but I think this. See, that doesn't involve a recurring event that is very accurate. Because we also know, for instance, that the ice ages repeat very accurately. Every 90,000 years there's an ice age, and then every 10,000 years there's a warm age. And, believe it or not, we are at the end of that warm age. And the scientists are now saying we're entering a greenhouse effect. But I think that contradicts what geology says and what history says. So again, how will we use this information? I do believe it will explain a lot of things. It will explain how religions were formed. What is the Christ? Is the Christ going to be a human being that descends out of the skies? Is the Christ going to be an energy? Could it be both? Could it be also the return of a comet or planet that causes evolution, that is composed of water, which causes life? You see? Change causes evolution. And it's a difficult concept to deal with because it deals with death and it deals with life. So I think hidden within all of these mysteries are numerology, meaning to numerology, meaning to religion, meaning to what the Christ is and what life is. It's a real complicated subject that really requires, I'm interested in your comments and your ideas about this. There's a lot of authors out there who've talked about similar things, but they haven't really put it together and proved it, relating it to astronomy, geology, religion.
When you take the part about Armageddon in the war, is you start talking about in the end that there shall be a red moon and a red sun.
Who said?
That is in that reading. About
No, it didn't describe the red
yes,
moon.
no, not describe. They talk about the red moon. The moon shall turn in red.
Oh yes, they were just referring to the prophecy that's described by the Christ. That the Christ gives a series of signs. One of the signs is wars and rumors of wars. But he said, don't worry about this. This is only the beginning of sorrows. He says, there will be a great earthquake. He says, then immediately after comes the tribulation, where the sun turns black, the moon blood red. And that's when there's going to be real problems. And he said, unless this is cut short, all flesh will be lost. But it is going to be cut short. That's the promise. Any other questions?
Like you mentioned just now, you said something about if it happens in sort of 40 years, but I feel a bit confused there. Don't you believe this is going to go on in the next 15 years?
Yeah, I'm giving myself a little leeway.
Yeah, I realise.
I believe it's very short.
It's my belief that in the next 15 years, we're at the end of that, what I call the 13,000-year cycle of the in-breath and out-breath of the universe.
Well, I believe that too. I mean, some of those calculations may be off 15 or 20 years. It's still within our lifetime. I think it is within 15 years, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The weather's changing dramatically. We've developed an ozone hole over the South Pole since 1980. The North Magnetic Pole is wandering wildly since 1950. There's more earthquakes and volcanic eruptions since 1950 than any other time. Something's going on. I don't know how this planet could be causing that at that distance right now, but something's going on, and something's changing radically fast.
British meteorologists have been studying the weather patterns in the world. I have a film on it at home. It's really interesting. They're looking at the degrees of temperature that the world has taken on in the last 100 years.
Mhm.
I think it's been a half a degree. They say within the next 50, it's going to, according to them, it could be anywhere from 5 to 8 degrees, which we cannot cope with.
Well, That itself may be caused by your greenhouse gases. It may be totally unrelated to this thing that's going to
Well, they
happen.
say it's related to the weather patterns plus man's intervention.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm looking at is these stories seem to be accurate. I don't know how they relate to what's going on right now concerning war and the war with nature. They may be related just because of synchronicity. Anyway, maybe sometime we can have another class where we look more in depth at numbers, what they mean spiritually. I think these things not only have an astronomical basis, but for instance, anytime 40 is mentioned now, it always refers to a period of tribulation, a period of testing. So it may have originally been an accurate time. It may have rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but it's a period of tribulation. It has real meaning.
Certainly is true with midlife.
Yeah. Hey.
It's just no coincidence. It's also connected.
And that goes again for the numbers 7, the numbers 21 and 22, and all the numbers 1 through 10. That's...
Kitty wanted me to ask about the number 144,000, 12 times 12.
That is also an astronomical number. It is related to the number 4. It is also spiritually a 9 when you add the numbers together. In fact, most of the numbers in Revelation add up to a 9. 666, 666, 1260, and 144,000. But again, it's one of the numbers that is related to the keeping of time. The number 12, 140, 1,440, which 144,000 is just an addition of 100, multiplication by 100. But I had those numbers available. In fact, I have a sheet of paper I'll show you that relates it as far as relating to astronomy. It does relate. In fact, all the numbers in Revelation relate to astronomy. And I'm trying to figure out exactly what in the world are you talking about, John. It's too coincidental that they're all relating to astronomy.
You mentioned the 4 worlds. Astronomically, what are they?
I have a belief about that. In Revelation, they talk about the 4 beasts. I'm not too familiar with Kabbalah as
You
Paul.
mentioned it too, Paul.
I will show the 4 worlds on Kabbalah, but he will speak of it in a different context.
No.
In the Revelation, it talks about the 4 beasts and the beasts. And the beast, they're one. Okay? They talk about 4 horses. Okay? They travel, and they're different colors. The first horse is white. The second horse is red. The third horse is black. And the last horse is pale. It's dying. Which seems to indicate that we're entering the pale horse. Everything's sick right now. And the earth is sick. It's ill. And if you look back at the legends, from the last period when the world began, we seem to have come through 4 ages. The age of the bull, Taurus, the age of the ram, the age of Pisces, and now we're entering the age of Aquarius. There seems to be something with those ages relating to the cycle that I'm talking about. I'm not sure how they relate, but I think they do relate.
Have you ever tied that in with the chakras? The 4 different continents that we've been through, the red, the orange, the yellow, the green, we're now breaking out to the heart level. That's the way
That would make sense. I've never looked at it.
understood the 4 worlds as we've come and wiped off every 13,000 years another cycle. Just like a farmer rotating a crop, you know.
Right. Well, again, I think we've got to remember when we teach, we've got to say these things are on many levels. There's a body level. In fact, that's the first way I studied Revelation, at a very bodily level, that these things were all chakras and that it had nothing to do with astronomy and space and time, or it was just spiritual. But I think that there were several levels that they're talking about because it was a drama that he was acting out.
Oh yeah, I realise
In
it's on
his
many levels.
vision.
Have you looked at the theory about after the age of Aquarius, we're going to be going into the age of Libra? That was skipping over that whole cycle.
No, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
David, when you're talking about the universe as water reminded me of an underground book of the 1960s, Dawn of the Magician, where they present the ice theory, German scientists, and a lot of the esoteric meaning of all of this relating to something here, and the misuse that Third Reich had interpretation and so forth. But a lot of things that I find interesting.
I'm trying to hold, I mean, I've heard so much. I've been with Paul now on 11 years, and I've heard so much, and I'm trying to hold a factual, objectable view of all these things now, because it's so easy to get stuck in one mold that I have to hear everything and see what fits in place, and if it's not going to logically fit with all these other myths, I'm going to throw it out. I've got to see that everything fits together, and I know they will when it comes together, and it will unify science and religion.
Do you think you can really understand this with your mind?
I haven't used my mind a lot. In fact, I made this discovery by not using my mind. It just
Say the question again, louder.
I said, do you think you can really understand this with your mind?
And I have to say, I have to use both. I have to use my mind logically to look at this. But a lot of the information I've been getting recently is, for one, because I've desired it, and things start coming to me. And I didn't have to use, they just came to me. Books, information, comments. And the other is, I will wake up with a dream. I didn't figure it out. And the aha experience that I had last November was something that really scared me, because it hit me so hard that it was unbelievable experience discovering. It was something Nostradamus had said, and when I related it to Genesis, I said, that makes so much sense. And then it scared me. I thought, God, if this is true, we've only got a short time left, but I'm holding my opinion about it, because I've always thought that everything is going to happen as everybody says it's going to happen. All the recent prophets are saying it's going to happen in this time period. But if astronomy proves we've got another 100 years to go, well, I'm glad.
And could you go back to the picture where you show that planet coming in again?
Mm-hmm.
Just look at the symbology. You said the inner was up top and the outer was...
Yeah, the inner planets and the outer planets.
And it was coming from the outer.
It was coming from the
And
outer.
it's like a catalyst coming in, causing change.
Yes.
And how does that apply to us? I mean, just the symbology of...
Well, you always have an unexpected event coming into your life, causing change. You just went through that experience.
Why do you have the Lord of Hosts up there?
The what?
The Lord of Hosts.
Oh, I remember that. Throughout the Old Testament, you'll find the words "the Lord of Hosts" used. That's a very unique phrase used by the Hebrews. God had many names. Elohim was one. In fact, that's used in the creation story. But Lord of Hosts may refer to this planet, which may not be a whole planet. It may be a grouping of pieces left over from that collision that seem to be causing what John in the Revelation described, these hailstones, these plague of hailstones. And if these are composed of a lot of water, you're going to get a lot of rain and a lot of hailstones. And it may be referring to this God, which has an effect, a very large effect, just as the sun did and the moon did. This Lord of Hosts.
What would you say to those who say God said he destroyed the earth with water once, the next time it will be by fire?
The only thing I would say is that if these things that hit us, in fact John describes it as a mountain of fire falling into the ocean. I just don't know how this astronomical activity will affect the earth this time. And it may be something, in fact the Hopis have described it, once by water, once by fire, once by water. I don't know why it alternates. That's something I can't explain.
It's elemental.
It's elemental.
The reference to the Hopi, is that from Black Elk Speaks?
The reference that I have are from their, it's not from Black Elk, no, it's
The Book
from,
of the Hopi.
pardon?
Book of the Hopi.
Book of the Hopi,
The
yeah.
Book of the Hopi. I think Les will, I told him to get Black Elk Speaks, but he'll want that one as well.
So, if there's not any other questions, we'll take another break. Paula, you want to start right after me? You want to take a little break? You have a question?
Could you just flip over the chart to the one?
Yeah, you didn't show much on that one. That's,
Yeah.
Which one?
The next one.
That one right
that's right,
there.
yeah, you never really explained it.
I didn't want to get too long. I
Oh,
could go
that's
on for, if you guys are
I'm
in.
enjoying it, yeah. Well, I don't know about anyone else.
Take your time. Stephen is coming at 4:30, and we're going to do the Star Wars trilogy
Oh,
related to
okay.
Kabbalah. So you have some time before he arrives.
Well, remember, the circle is divided into 360 degrees, and there seems to be an ancient mystery, and Paul one time at night talked about this. Squaring the circle seems to be an ancient mystery, and it seems to be what squaring the circle, the number pi, the circumference of a circle in relation to the radius, the golden section, all those are numbers that relate to either the growth of nature or astronomy. And some of the numbers that I pulled out cycles, because again, the I Ching, number 24, Fu, return, says after periods of 6, the 7th brings return. The 6 days of creation, the earth and the universe were not created in 7 days. It was created in 6 days. Man, the universe, everything. 6 steps, and again and again and again, throughout all the mysteries, stages of 6, periods of 6. In Genesis, it describes the 6 days of creation. And God says in Psalms 90 that there is the Lord of hosts. He's eternal for endless generations. But his time is a day is as 1,000 years, which seems to be a key. A day is as 1,000 years, and I've been looking at that. If the 6 days of creation represented 6,000 years, there's some interesting geological evidence that indicates there's hardly a waterfall on this planet that is older than 6,000 years old. There's a lot of evidence that something happened between 6,000 and 7,000 years ago and around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. 2 major events. In fact, you've heard of the frozen mammoths, in Siberia. The Ice Age ended at the same time, and apparently there was a great flood at the same time. What caused it?
Can you share the story with the people here about the stomach of the woolly mammoth? The elephant, what was inside? And how
Oh yeah, the mammoth
freezing.
was frozen within a period of 1 hour, and the temperature that would be required to freeze a mammoth that quickly, so that the contents inside the stomach would not decompose, would be minus 150 degrees within 1 hour. And it was asphyxiated. There's a new science today where they can tell how something died. And that science says that these woolly mammoths were asphyxiated and they died very quickly. And they were subjected to these very low temperatures.
Went from 60 to above to 100.
Yeah, to 150 below within a matter of an hour. So again, what caused that? What could cause such a dramatic, not even a polar shift could cause a dramatic temperature change like that. Not that cold, not that quickly. A polar shift would take several hours actually.
They're also spread over such a large area.
Yes.
that
And-
this
and-
phenomenon was.
Not only that, animals from different parts of the earth were grouped as if they were washed together. They were caught in a cave, and trees and stumps and all these animals from different parts of the world were washed into the same cave and died together.
looking at your chart, it makes sense to me everywhere, except though there's 25, 20 days.
Yes.
And you said it was 7 days. That would make it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant 7 years. Yeah, that wouldn't make sense. Years. Now that's on a 360-day calendar. These are some of the numbers that are mentioned in the Bible, and what I've been trying to reconcile is what's considered the solar year, which is now 365.25 days, and the use of what they may have called the prophetic year. One of the other things I'm looking at in the Bible, if you look at the prophecies of Daniel and how they relate to the Christ, scholars have not been able to make those prophecies work using a 365.25 day year. But if they use a 360-day year, they work. They work very exactly to the day. They work. In fact, things like Christmas and the summer and the winter solstice and Easter and many different festivals from many different religions, separated by large periods of time, fall on the same days for some reason. And there seems to be, again, some synchronicity that's involved.
You know what I'm thinking? You know, I don't know much about it. Excuse that clear. It seems like this is based on a mechanistic kind of picture of the universe rather than a cause and effect kind of universe.
Mechanistic. Well, what do you mean by mechanistic?
Well, it's these cycles that happen regardless of anything else.
Well, I think you have
we're not in control, which seems to go against
that we're not in control.
Well, that the thought of man is not changing anything, that it's cyclical. Whatever we do, it's happening.
Well, you know, that's how the Chinese believe. Everything was cyclical. The human body has cyclic biorhythms. There's a time of famine, and there's a time of plenty. But in the ancient times, in the very ancient times, there was not these things. There was not death. It was called the Golden Age. There was no drought. There was no famine. It may have been before this wanderer. I don't know. It may be that out of this body, those things, we are not subject to those things. I mean, it's a good question. Again, the Chinese belief was very strong about about there being cycles, and the wise man would be one who would recognize the cycles, not try to change it, because the cycles have meaning, that they are of God, and that to try to change them, for instance, to try to change the coming of this planet so that it would not ruin our civilization as it is, may be going against God.
Do you see any correlation or possibility of correlation to the microcosm and the macrocosm of original sin? Like the original thought, the original or erroneous thought?
Actually, the wanderer hitting this planet that I talked about called Tiamat was caused because of the sin of Tiamat. This goes way back to the beginning. In fact, they applied this original sin because of something that happened on that planet. And that may have been a planet of our golden age. I don't know. It's hard to say, but those are the Sumerian legends about that planet.
It's like if there was absolutely perfectly balanced vibration and one discordant note
causes things. I mean, who's to say if we became perfect in harmony that this would stop happening?
I think if we subscribe to what, for one example, the Course in Miracles says, and this is just one of several of these indicators, that the physical universe is the projection that separation is real. That we created the physical universe. That is the projection makes perception. Then we are totally responsible for what we're experiencing. And you can see the correlation between the state of consciousness and what is actually happening in the external. And as we are approaching Christ consciousness, we are just claiming full responsibility. That what happens within us determines what is going to happen out here. And that this is taking on the total responsibility that is Christ consciousness. If we bear that in mind, then as collectively we come to this awakening, the outcome is our individual choice. So it's not a mechanistic view that we're not, we can't do anything about it.
Sure.
We are doing it.
Well, I think regardless of these circumstances, I mean, Mel, you're talking about, we could become the Christ right now and still live in peace and change the world around us. We may not be able, we might. Even the Christ was able to move the stars in their paths by the way he walked. But he might not be able to do that and might not choose to do that because of the evolution that this event may cause. We may not know what would happen if this did not happen.
I want to quote a friend of mine, maybe someone has said it before, but I heard it from her. She said sometimes when people who are saying that we should try to change the earth changes or see things differently, she said to her it feels like a group of parents sitting around saying, oh, I wish I could stop my children from losing their baby teeth because it hurts, or their teeth will fall out or something. But, I mean, the point is you have to make room for your grown-up teeth to come in, so it would be a very limited viewpoint. And that kind of said it all for me as far as changing things.
I think it's very good.
Maybe you just made the remark that Jesus changed the stars in their paths by the way he lived his life. Did you elaborate further on that, or did you just, I just heard the mention of it, and I'm wondering if
I just said that by living that life, it is said that the stars work against us, and that by living the life of the Christ, they change their paths to accommodate that new life. Now, I don't know if we can do that. I mean, that's pretty high ideal. That is the ideal.
David, could you see that possibly that is something to do with the overcoming of the vibration of the stars in which we were born under?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Rather than the actual physically moving of the stars?
Yes. I mean, it may be that is a symbolic way of speaking. It may be actual. But again, I've heard said by Paul and by others that when we are born, we are under positive and negative influences, and if we change ourselves, we nullify those negative influences.
Can I just jump in there on something that Ellen said? Can that mean overcoming our chart rather than literally moving the stars? I would take out rather than, because it doesn't have to be one or the other. I really believe that these things that the fundamentalists take very literally are probably literally true. And what's more important is the metaphor that they create for us to work with. So it just may be that if you or I overcome our natal chart by the way we live, the heavens themselves might literally change positions as a result of that. I think that's what they
and Jesus
say, by the way Jesus lived his life.
And Jesus seemed to mention that, and in mentioning the tribulation time, that unless these times are cut short, that all flesh will be lost. There seems to be some decision there.
Right.
There seems to be some wavering in what could happen. I mean, it could be really bad, or it could be...
What do the times represent?
What times?
When you said these times are going to be cut short, are you talking about
the cycle, the end of the cycle where all these things happen in that generation that Jesus said. All the things, those end of the world prophecies said all these things would happen in this generation. They won't happen over a long period. They're going to happen.
That could relate to our emotional body as well.
Sure.
Cut those short. And as Thomas talks about dropping it.
Just dropping it.
I was attending a group of people, it was a group of people over in Hampton, and we had come up with a thing that we saw very much like what you're talking about, very close. And by studying the Bible and so forth, and we came to the conclusion that we were at the stage at the beginning of the seventh day, or the end of the creation type seventh too, rather than the first and 6 days.
Yes, that's what I would agree. We're beginning of the seventh day, which would mean
We're at the end
this event is
We're at the end of the sixth day,
cycle.
starting on the seventh day.
Right. I would agree with that. That's been my feeling, and that's what I've been trying to prove. But I haven't been able to do it yet conclusively to myself. And that's why I've been trying to look at it from an astronomical point of view, because I believe if this thing actually exists, it can be proven. And it can be related to geological studies and on and on and on, mythology, and proven.
David, did you ever study the configuration of the stars and the planets and the symbology of them at the time of the birth of Jesus?
I've heard about that, about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Yes.
And Virgo.
Yeah, in
born
Virgo.
of a virgin, which was part of the constellation.
Yes.
Omra Mikhail Ivanov did a very good talk on that, which is in book form. And it ties in right across to what we're talking about.
Well, it would make sense. I do believe these things are acted out in drama in accordance with what the stars are saying as well. And they do have great influence. And in the past, the ancient religions gave them names of gods. The sun was a god, the moon was a god, this wandering planet was a god, and on down the line.
I wonder what would they mean, seeing as how he was, to our way of thinking, a Capricorn, when they said he was born of a virgin, and that Virgo, would that be his rising sign?
I don't know enough about astrology.
Just ask her maybe about that.
We can put up this breath chart.
That's
with all the aspects.
Yeah, I feel I'd like to. This may come out the wrong way, but it's not meant in that. I don't know how I'm going to put this over, but just now there was mention about things like it's almost like we've got no choice in this. This is what's happening. I can understand that people can feel like that, but it's my belief that what's happening here with this thing that comes around every so many cycles, that we can prevent it when we grow into our full Christ consciousness. And I believe that it's up to us to push ourselves as hard as we can to do that and stop all this happening, you know. And I believe the message, you know, when you do this ought to be to get people to understand that we can alter all of this. You know, it doesn't have to happen.
Well, it's certainly a good incentive.
You know. Well, it is a good. I personally believe that that's what we're going to be faced with.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is more so at the end. I believe a lot of this will happen. But
it may be
sometimes is it doesn't have to happen.
Well, again, I do. There's a lot of things we have more choice about, and as far as wars, especially, and disease and famine, and what we're doing to our planet, we have a heck of a lot of choice. I think we also have to understand reality as it is, and you know, it's like when the storms happen. Jesus didn't always cut them off because they may be hurting people.
No, I don't mean in that respect. I can go along with detaching from what's going to happen, but what I'm saying is each one of us ourselves. I believe we're at a time this time like no other time on this fourth level.
It's a chance to grow.
It's a chance for everybody simultaneously to grow right across the planet. We've never had this opportunity before.
That I would agree with wholeheartedly.
We didn't have the communication systems or anything in those days. And at this time, I don't see it as doom and gloom. I see it as tell people what's happening and let's make the changes.
Well, that's the challenge of talking about the subject so that it doesn't come across that way.
Yeah.
The last cycle you're writing down there is the precise time, the 26,000 cycle, is the precise time that you can find evidence in the geological layers in the Earth of foreign particles coming out of space into the Earth. It's the precise time.
This time of year?
and the speculations about an asteroid hitting the planet.
Because I had heard at that time about 26
Exactly.
million years, not 1,000 years.
Oh, I've read 26,000.
26,000. I haven't heard that one. That's interesting. There is a lot of evidence for these things repeating precisely, and that's the amazing thing about it, and that it seems to give some credence to these legends and myths.
That ties in with breath as well. Those same figures ties in with the breath that of a cycle of breath per day in the body and per week and year and so on.
I think we of the 20th century, as we look out into the universe, we have a handicap. We're so ingrained with the materialistic view. To the ancients, they experienced the universe, the cosmos as a breathing cosmos. And so there are energies. When they think of the planets, they're really dealing with energies. They're quite aware of those.
Yes.
We think in terms of material bodies and all that. We're just beginning to open to the archetypal energies that are represented. And when we look at this material with that in mind, and try to bracket off this entrenched materialistic, something else can open up. And then we're really talking about energies within ourselves.
The Apostle Paul
interact.
called it principalities and powers, and that there would be a war in the heavens at this end time.
You know what strikes me about this is you're saying that this has happened for millions and millions of years with absolute precision, but there is a factor that we have now that has never before been in history. We have literally changed the pH of rain, we've changed the climatic system, we've done things that seem like man has reached the point of being able to destroy that cycle. And maybe the cycle of destruction, that part of that natural cycle, needs to come. And maybe we better pray that it will come in spite of what we're doing, because it looks like that
Well,
our technology,
you're saying
we
one of my
could
thoughts
stop.
I didn't want to say.
It looks like maybe we could stop this wonderful thing that has always been mathematically perfect, and surely we don't want to be the species that blew it for all of creation.
I mean, it does
That's
cause.
not a mega statement.
It
but
is.
It's a thought.
That has been my belief, and right now we're headed to such an overpopulation of this planet that cannot support it, because we do not support our vitality. We don't know how to regulate our vitality. Well, I don't want to go on about that too much. It is a point to consider.
On that, I think the greatest gift we may be able to give the earth is to help it go through its changes. And I think the work that we can do, that Les is talking about, is what you've mentioned. It's the shortening of the time. That's the grace of God. So that it does what it has to do to cleanse itself. And yet, there's enough left over so that we can still go on.
There is that reminds me of some interesting statements said about the times, and the end time. The times, and the half times.
Yes. Times and half times.
And there's a lot of belief by a lot of churches that we're in the half times, and I've been trying to discover precisely what that means, because the way it's said in English, it means 3.5 times. And if you read Revelation, it describes about the 3.5, and it's described in 3 ways: 1,260 days, 3.5 years, 3.5 days, and 42 months. They're all saying the same thing: end times, time, and a half time. And that is a very mysterious statement that may be related to pi and the circumference of a circle. I'm not sure, but I believe so.
Another thought is that in these times, probably for the first time, we're in the times of 70 years and 10, which is another 3.5.
70 years and 10. Where does that come from?
Tying in that man lives.
Right, yes, we're in the 70 years and 10.
So that's another 3.5.
There's a lot of factors in what I'm studying. I mean, there's so many things. Just like the point Paul brought up about during the time of Noah's flood, God set a rainbow in the sky that he said, never again will I destroy man by water. And that is another factor that, if what I'm talking about has to do with comets with lots of water and lots of flooding. And what's going on here? That's another factor that seems to confuse things, and there's so many things to consider.
There's a factor called the incarnation of Jesus as the Christ,
Right.
which happens since we.
I'm reminded of a theme that Paul introduces at the mystery school, and the very definition is paradox. If the very problem is also the catalyst towards the awakening. If we didn't have the problem, we wouldn't be sitting in this room talking about these cosmic matters. We'd be living in a traditional society and very much limited within the traditional society. But the problem has thrown us out of the traditional society and the traditional consciousness into a consciousness that is taking full responsibility.
Well, I believe that this will also lead to science and working with science and a sacred science of geometry and numerology that reveals the natural energy source. And I believe that may also be a side effect of discovering what all these numbers together mean, because they may reveal mathematically, let's say the DNA, and how life grows, and how a little seed becomes a big tree. I mean, that's a miracle. That is interesting how that happens. Man hasn't been able to figure that one out yet.
Well, I hope he doesn't until it's been purged, because I think that's the main idea, not to give us that power until the darkness is gone, so be misused.
That's true.
It's waiting there. We're waiting for the
right time.
Things to be cleared. That level of turnover.
Let's take a break.
Before we break,
Give David what we affectionately call a standing ovulation.
Yes.
Incredible job that you did.
Yeah, how many of you guys out there?
Steve, I'm just going to turn the machine on so we
That
can
means
hear
you're
you.
supposed to throw eggs at me.
Give me the front treat, Mr.
So bad. You don't keep going.
Are we running?
Yes, we're running.
How many people here have seen any of the Star Wars trilogy films? Okay, we got a lot of fans. A number of them. Okay, there are three films. Three films. The first one was called Star Wars. The second one was called The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back. And the third one, The Return of the Jedi. Many of us Star Wars fans were hoping there would be a fourth and a fifth and so on, but they didn't do that. It doesn't matter. What I would like to do is, for those of us who haven't heard the story, just go through the story itself. But talking about the story, as you're listening to it, imagine that you are experiencing it as your own dream. That is, of course, the way that you watch any movies or dramas that you watch, isn't it? You know, the ones that have a message, as if the characters are all characters in your own dream and it's your own drama that you're experiencing, and all the characters in there are a part of you, and they're talking about your own struggles and challenges and character transformation to reach the goal at the end. That is the way that you usually watch films, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Very good. That was the right answer. Because what we're going to find is all the same symbology, the symbols relating to the same principles that you find in the Bible, that you find in the things that David was sharing with you, that you'll find in the principles that Thomas will share with you about numbers and sacred numbers. All the same principles and symbols are in the movie. One of the things that the movies, plays, that the dramas do is it brings the characters to life. So that you can, it's like the ancient storytelling, taking these powers and principles that we learn about and making them a part of our own lives, the inner life and the relating to the world around us. Karen. Run by.
Sorry to start off with.
Is it important to note here that Joseph Campbell had a large part in doing the Star
Oh,
Wars
yes.
That's
trilogy? And also, do we know, is he an initiate of any particular esoteric school?
George Lucas was the writer and director of the Star Wars trilogy films, and he had a ranch in California. It's basically just north of Los Angeles, called the Skywalker Ranch. For those of you who've heard the films, you know what that means. And there, if any of you have seen any of the videos about Joseph Campbell being interviewed by Bill Moyers, yeah, that took place on the Skywalker Ranch. They met there and they talked about Joseph Campbell's, what he had studied for his whole lifetime about the sacred teachings throughout many different cultures. Yes, he was obviously an initiate. I wouldn't know how to evaluate what that means or what school or what tradition, but what he became well known for at the end of his life was his study across many different traditions and helping us to see the reality in those myths. You know, what we thought were just myths and just of the imagination. He showed the reality of the effect that it has on people, and really brought that alive in our day today. He shared a lot of those teachings with George Lucas in consulting with him and inspiring him in the writing of these films. George Lucas took it the step from just making old myths to making a current myth that embodied a lot of the different teachings from different traditions. So you'll even find certain words in used for names or places in the film, or in all three of the films, that relate to certain principles in some of these different teachings, and we'll point them out, I think, later this evening as we go more into the symbology of it. But first, we want to review the story. And remember, this is your own dream. Let's start this story. We begin at a time when the evil empire has overtaken the galaxy. Darkness reigns. And the emperor, who is evil incarnate, has taken over. You just get the feeling for this really evil, powerful, slimy guy. I mean, he was really slimy. But he doesn't show up for a while. Nobody really sees the emperor. He's this nameless, faceless figure. Put down emperor. This the faceless. He doesn't have a name. He's just the emperor. But he instills fear. His name instills fear in everybody. And he has, legions and legions of warriors. You never even see them. They're all in armor. They look like machines. None of them are people, individuals. They're all just machines. And they're out conquering the whole galaxy. And he has one particular apprentice. And the apprentice's name is Darth Vader. Darth Vader. You don't actually even see him as an individual. He wears armor, all dressed in black with a black cape. He wears a helmet with a visor over the front. You don't see him. You can only hear him breathing. Right?
Is it possible to relate that to the Kabbalah as you say it? Or?
Well, we're going to come back and do that after we go through the whole story first. And then we'll come back and do it later. What you want to get is the feeling of the personalities and the places, just the character. And when you feel that, as you know a little bit about Kabbalah, you'll be able to see where those principles fit in relation to one another. Okay, so there are those characters. There's the Emperor and his apprentice, Darth Vader. Black, evil. And the way that he motivates people is with fear.
Death.
And death, right. He's very good at it. Now we switch over to the Princess Leia. Okay? Now, Princess Leia has been acting, she actually has been acting to kind of lead the rebellion. Now, the rebellion is a loose coalition. And that phrase is used, and you have to remember it, loose coalition. It's not well organized, it's not well focused, but it's trying to overcome this evil empire and set order and right and good back into the universe. But they're not doing such a good job so far. And Leah has plans, has stolen plans for this special Death Star. I mean, it's a huge spaceship, bigger than a moon, that has been created by the evil empire. Well, she's stolen plans to it that can help the rebellion figure out how to destroy this thing.
I just want to comment that Death Star relates to disaster, and disaster is evil star.
Get that? Death Star, disaster. There are a lot of little plays on words like that. Lots of them. Disaster is...
Taken apart, disaster, evil star.
Oh, and it is. It's also the same... Oh, no, I'm kidding. So many little different things you can try to put them together. So we have the Death Star that the rebellion is trying to destroy in order to stop this evil empire from overtaking the galaxy. And I mean, this thing could destroy, it destroys whole planets with one shot. You know, with a weapon like that, you could rule everyone. And she's just about to be overtaken by Darth Vader, but she takes these two little machines, C-3PO, C-3PO, that's the machine's name, and the other one is R2-D2. Now you're going to see these characters a lot. She gives the plans to R2-D2, puts it in a little machine, and she jettisons them out onto a planet called Tatooine, T-A-N-T-O-O-I-N-E. It's a desert planet. Very important, desert planet. This is the base planet that all this stuff is going to happen from. But it's a desert now. It's not a lush, green, tropical, happy place, because remember, the galaxy is being ruled by the evil forces. And so light is not in charge. Light and good is not in charge of this universe. So we start on the desert planet that has very little life. These guys, C-3PO and R2-D2, these guys are talking back and forth to one another throughout the whole movie. Now, C-3PO is always, he's like your basic, the parent, the butler, he's the butler. And he's always trying to make sure we do the right thing, you know? We've got to worry about this, and oh my God, well this isn't happening. He's also a protocol droid, you know? Protocol, have to make sure we do the socially acceptable thing all the time. He's the parent in you. R2-D2, he doesn't care about protocol. He just steps out into adventure, and he's a cute little guy, like the cute little child in you. And the interesting thing that you see in all three movies is that these two guys are going beep, 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 back and forth talking. They're going to represent your self-talk. The self-talk that just runs like a machine on automatic pilot. They're programmed. Well, this has these, R2-D2, this cute little machine, has these secret plans that are thrown onto the desert planet, and a guy named Luke Skywalker finds R2-D2, and, I better make a long story short. Luke, in following R2-D2, ends up finding another character who's been living out in the desert, like a, not a monk, but an ancient, like an old recluse.
Hermit.
Hmm?
A hermit.
A hermit, right, that's the word. He's been a hermit. And his name is?
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm going to write that also a slightly different way, just so that you see. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Little phrases like that. He's been...
You can't be joining the armies.
Now he's been living as a hermit. He is in what the old days was called a Jedi Knight. Kind of like a Grail Knight, I guess you could say, in the Western tradition. A Jedi Knight. They learned to, basically he learned the martial arts. He learned how to use the Force. Put the Force down.
Does Jedi mean anything?
We haven't figured that out yet. It might, but we haven't seen it. So this knight, in the ancient tradition, a knight means a servant. It's literally the translation for what a knight is. Knight serves the king. Well, Jedi Knights served the Force. The Force that is in all things, it permeates all things, it gives life to everything in the universe. That's the Force. And he had learned certain teachings, and he also knew that Luke's father was also a Jedi Knight, but he was killed by this Darth Vader. So all of a sudden Luke's got a quest. He's going to go and save the princess from this Darth Vader who had killed his father and was in league with the evil emperor. He was going to join the rebellion and get off this stupid desert planet where nothing was happening. Where the only real excitement was shooting womp rats riding these cute little scooters. Speeders, right. You get the picture? We're going off for adventure. Where there has been such a bland life so far. There's got to be more to life than this. So they go to, I can't remember. Do you remember the name of the city? There's a city that is like a trading city. Anyway. And as they come into the city, the whole empire knows that they're looking for these two droids. And Obi-Wan Kenobi has this special ability to communicate with people. He's got these two droids sitting in the back of his speeder, and Luke's sitting there right next to him. And as he comes up to the guards that are checking over the droids, they just say, the guards say, "Where are you going?" And he says, "These are not the droids you're looking for." And one guard turns to the other guard and said, "These are not the droids we're looking for." And then Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "You can go on your way." And the guard says, "You can be on your way." He has this ability to take weak minds that don't know how to focus, and suggest thoughts, and those thoughts become their own thoughts. So they get through the barrier there, and they go looking in a bar where you find the scum of life. Oh yes, these little creatures, they're all ugly, and they're not necessarily evil. They're just disgusting. Disgusting lower animal forms.
Is he talking about some of my friends?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Your friends, eh? Okay. So they go in there and they're looking for a ship that can secretly take them over to a certain place, so on and so forth. Then again, to make a long story short, they find a gentleman called Han Solo. He represents just your basic reckless, individualist swashbuckler. And that's played, what's his name? Harrison Ford. In all the movies that he went on to do, that is the epitome of the role that he played. Indiana Jones.
Hero.
Yeah, the hero. He played the hero figure. Lots of guts, absolutely reckless abandon. So he's got this ship that's just kind of been pieced together, but it's real fast and usually acts as a smuggler. But he's got Jabba the Hutt on his tail. Jabba is disgustingness all rolled into one sloppy, ugly figure, okay? He's one of these lower earth forms that represents all that is evil about the appetites. Okay? Wanting, having, trying to fulfill yourself with other things. He's a real disgusting character. Well, oh, that's right. Han Solo is joined and always together with a character who is a Wookiee. It's W-O-O-K-I-E. His name is Chewbacca. He's about 10 feet tall. He's a big, hairy, he's like Bigfoot, yeah.
But lovely.
Lovable Bigfoot, he roars, but he's a really soft and cuddly guy when you get to know him.
I've heard, unless you know different, Chewbacca is from Sabaka, Russian for dog.
Ooh.
You know, Buena's dog.
I didn't know that.
It's
Yeah,
supposed
it was like his dog.
You should get that on.
Chewbacca is from Sabaka.
Sabaka.
Sabaka, which is
Chewbacca, I have heard that Chewbacca was based on the Russian word for dog, which is Sabaka.
okay. Like yeah, and it was he always followed him around. He would do anything that Han Solo said, unless there was food involved elsewhere, and he would always go for the food. And you'll find out a couple times.
He would whine.
He would, oh yeah, and he would.
Is it a coincidence that Chewbacca is
Chew.
Yeah.
That's right. And he gets him into trouble when he just goes for food and they try to tell him no. So you've got, now we've got Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's called Old Ben. You've got the two droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO. You've got Luke Skywalker, he's really like a teenager, 19 years old, out to conquer the universe, da-da-da-da, and he has a sword, a special lightsaber. This is not just any kind of a sword. This is a lightsaber. It's made of the power of light that was left with old Ben for him, so that when he came of age, he could also train to become a Jedi Knight. So Luke Skywalker is out on pursuing his destiny of becoming a Jedi Knight. He's got this Han Solo character with Chewbacca along with them to help them along. And
It's supposed to be saber.
light saber, S-A-B-E-R. It's a sword.
R-E.
It's a saber too, but it's a.
Pretty British.
So we're all on a spaceship now, hurtling through the galaxy, and we come to a place where this Death Star is, and the Death Star has Darth Vader, the big guy in the black suit, who was a Jedi Knight, but he was turned to the dark side. The dark side that uses evil to manipulate and control the Force. Well, they've just blown up the Earth with the Death Star. And old Ben, there was this little scene there where when it was all blown up, old Ben, he just felt, it was like, oof, right in the solar plexus there. What was it called? He felt 1,000 voices crying out in pain. He felt a movement in the Force. And he felt through the force of life across the universe, he felt that something huge and terribly evil had happened. So they end up coming out onto this Death Star, thinking that they were going to the Earth, and basically what they do is they save the Princess Leia. But to do this is one of the biggest parts in this first movie. Old Ben is fighting with his lightsaber against Darth Vader, who had his lightsaber. Now, old Ben's lightsaber is blue. Darth Vader's lightsaber is red. They're fighting away, and old Ben had been Darth Vader's teacher, but Darth Vader turned to the dark side and went away from old Ben. And Darth Vader keeps on telling him, I'm the teacher now, I'm the hot shot, I'm going to show you who's the big boy in town. And old Ben keeps on trying to say, you don't really understand what's going on here. If you kill me, I'll only become greater than you could ever imagine. Remember that. And at a certain point, when Luke was about to step in and try to help him, Luke is trying to get the princess and escape with all the other characters off of the Death Star. And that's what old Ben wants him to do, escape and get away to save the rebellion. And he knows that if Luke gets involved in this fight, he's going to be dog meat, because he just can't quite handle the Emperor, not the Emperor, Darth Vader yet. So what old Ben does is he sacrifices himself. He lets himself be killed by Darth Vader, so that Luke will turn and run. And at this point, what you see is instead of continuing to fight with his saber, he just takes his saber and he holds it like this. And Darth Vader swings his right across Old Ben, and you see a perfect cross formed by those two lightsabers, just like this. Perfect cross. It's not an equilateral cross, it's more like the crucifix cross. And all of a sudden, Old Ben's not there. I mean, it's not that his body was cut in two, it's just that he's not even there anymore. And about 10 seconds later, you hear Old Ben's voice speaking from the Force, from somewhere inside of Luke's head, telling him to get on with it. So all of a sudden, Old Ben is not a teacher from out here, he's a teacher from in here. He's one with the Force and can speak from inside Luke's mind. And he guides him along. And again, to make a long story short, Luke comes back as a warrior on a ship and blows up the Death Star with that one shot in a million. It had to be a perfect shot, totally balanced. And by not following the instruments on the what? Shuttlecraft. On the shuttlecraft. He doesn't follow the instruments on the shuttlecraft. He follows his own intuition. You know, let the Force guide you, is what Old Ben tells him. So, just like shooting womp rats back at home, he lets his intuition tell him how to guide himself. And just at the last minute, old Han Solo comes in and gives a blast that knocks Darth Vader off into space, and the Death Star gets blown up, but Darth Vader goes floating off. He still exists and is alive in the universe to bring back evil in another day. And so the first movie ends, and we're all happy. But that's only the first step. That starts off our path as training to be an initiate, Luke Skywalker. In the next one, draw a line here. In the next movie, it's called The Empire Strikes Back. So we get a feeling for what's going to happen in this one. This second movie is going to start to talk to us about some of the challenges of being a student and getting cocky. You know, getting a little carried away with, oh yeah, I'm an initiate, I can do great things. Shows you some of the mistakes you can make along the path. The rebellion goes to a planet called Hod, H-O-D. H-O-D. It's an ice planet. And on this ice planet, they have to become very disciplined in order to survive. They've really got to pull their act together so they don't disperse. Well, they get found out. Knowing that this is an ice planet and knowing that that name is Hod will become obvious to you later when we look at the Kabbalah, what it means. So you have this loose coalition that wasn't really accomplishing what it needed to accomplish. Now they go to an ice planet that forces them to focus and get together. Crystallize. That's right. Two opposite principles. But they get found out, and they all, at least some of them, many of them escape from this ice planet. And Luke Skywalker goes off in one direction. He goes to the Dagobah, D-A-G-O-B-A-H, the Dagobah system, to learn from a special teacher there. And that teacher was called Yoda. I think a lot of people, even if you haven't seen the movies, might know a little bit about Yoda. Yoda was a cute little guy about this big, strange-looking character with funny green ears. And he lived in the Dagobah system on a very primitive planet. I mean, this planet, it was like going way back into the primitive world where you would expect to see dinosaurs and flying reptiles and things like that. Just the pure quality of primitive life force. So here, Luke goes back to the primitive place to learn from this teacher. So Luke has got this whole image in mind of what it is to be a student. He's going to come and find Yoda, the great spiritual teacher of the Jedi. And there's this little pain-in-the-ass character who keeps on coming and running through his things and eating his food and just getting in the way all the time. He just can't stand this guy. And he's trying to tell this guy, listen, I'm here for bigger things than this. You're just getting in my way. And he says, I'm here to find Yoda, the Jedi teacher. And this little guy says, oh, Yoda, yes. I know Yoda. There was a phrase there. He said something to the effect that I'm going to be a great warrior. And Yoda ends up saying, this little character ends up saying, oh, I didn't know that wars made one great. He's got all these little quips in there that make him a real nerd, pain in the neck. So in the long run, what we find out is that little character is Yoda. See, you wouldn't know it. He just seems like a little character that's not that threatening, but he's one with the Force. And so in tune with all life that is, he can, with his will, direct that Force. And he becomes Luke's teacher. And at first, he's about to give up on him because Luke is just so impatient. He wants to get out of here, wants to get on with things, he doesn't want to deal with this, he wants to become a great warrior and save the universe. And finally, Yoda just says, just sitting there as if he's talking to someone who isn't there. He says, I can't teach him. He's not ready. He couldn't handle the teaching. And you hear old Ben's voice speaking out from nowhere again, saying, I was the same way when I first came to you. Yeah, but will he stick with what he starts? Well, you got to give him a chance. And all of a sudden Luke starts to realize, oh my God, this is the teacher and I've been blowing you. He says, I am ready. I'm not afraid. And then Yoda gets his look on his face and he says, you will be. That's his job. His job is to help prepare him to face his greatest fears, because that's where he'll find his greatest power. He also makes a comment to Luke. He says, you're not ready because your eyes are always off on the horizon, off in the future, never where you are at, what you are doing. Just like that. That's what Yoda's job is, to get his mind off of these crazy images about what he thinks this spiritual path is about and get him right here where he needs to be so that he can deal with reality. And so how does Yoda do that? He rides his back, literally. So you see Luke running around this planet with this little character strapped onto his back, nagging in his ear, telling him, no, you didn't do this well, not good enough, try it again. And always having to carry his teacher on his back. I'm sure you're familiar with what that is. You may have thought you were going out somewhere to find some great spiritual teacher, and the first thing that got in your way was some nagging person who you couldn't stand, and you wanted to get out of my way. I'm on a spiritual quest. That was your Yoda. And at some point in his whole training, he goes by this cave and he feels the power of the Force in that cave, and it's evil, and he knows there's darkness down there. And Yoda says, yes, and it's very powerful. Yoda tells him to go down there. That's his next test, is to face it. And he goes down there, and there's this figure that's Darth Vader, comes out. Oh my God, Darth Vader is here. So he pulls out his lightsaber, and what you notice in the movie is that Luke is the first one who strikes. Darth Vader just stands there. Doesn't even take out his lightsaber, just stands there. Luke pulls out his lightsaber, Darth Vader pulls out his lightsaber. Luke strikes, Darth Vader defends. And Luke cuts off Darth Vader's head. And you see the helmet rolling away, and then you see the face in the helmet, and it's Luke's face. That's a real dream experience for you. It was real, and he was coming face to face with the evil in him. But he was shown that he was taking on, he was exhibiting the force of evil. He was trying to be destructive and use that power of destruction to overcome what he thought was evil outside of him. And what Yoda keeps on trying to tell him is, if you take one step along the path on the dark side, forever will it dominate your destiny. That's a quote for you. Take one step along the path to the dark side, and forever will it dominate your destiny. So don't go that way. You have more training that you need. There's a ship. His ship has been dragged down into the mud, and Darth Vader's been teaching him how to use the power of the Force to move and influence things outside of him. You don't have to actually touch something to move it. You can let the Force do that when you're in harmony with the Force. And Luke tries. He tries. He puts a lot of effort into it, and he gets something to happen, but it's too much. He keeps on telling Yoda that you expect the impossible. These are all quotes. You expect the impossible. So Luke gives up. He says it's not possible to do it. And Yoda, this cute little guy, sits there and just lifts it right up out of the water and places it down, takes a deep breath, starts to walk away, and Luke says, I don't believe it. And Yoda says, that's why you fail. This is your dream. This is you. Okay, all this training is going on, and then we go off to Han Solo and Princess Leia and Chewbacca and the two cute little droids. They go off in another direction, trying to save the princess, but the evil Empire catches up with them, and Darth Vader captures them. Treachery. One of the guys that we thought was going to be a good guy, up in the City of the Sky. Right. It was, I can't remember his name. I can't get that one back to me, but a guy that Han Solo thought was his friend, but anyway, they got captured, and Han Solo ends up sacrificing himself in order to save the princess. So in the first one we had a sacrifice, in the second one we had a sacrifice. A self-sacrifice, a choice to let himself be taken to save someone else. Now this is a real big step for Han Solo. You know, Han Solo didn't care about anybody else. He was only involved in this thing because he was going to get paid and she was rich. You know, he was a real individualist, off for himself, crazy, reckless, and now he's sacrificing himself for some greater cause. You see a real character transformation in here, and they're starting to fall in love too. And Luke is feeling that this is happening. He's getting dreams and visions that his friends are in pain and that have been captured, and that Darth Vader is setting that as a trap to capture Luke, because they can feel in the Force that Luke is really the one that they need to overcome in order to win this whole ballgame, the Emperor and Darth Vader. And Yoda keeps on trying to tell him, don't go, you're not ready. You know, remember your failure in the test of the cave. You can't handle that challenge yet. But Luke says, I've learned so much since then. I can do it. I've got my lightsaber. Here we go. I'm going to save the universe. And he's going to go save his friend because he is a hotshot Jedi Knight. Yoda tells him, you're not a Jedi Knight yet. You haven't passed the tests that you need to pass. And Yoda tells him, don't go. And Luke decides to go anyway. And Luke gets beaten by Darth Vader. Okay? Darth Vader takes Han Solo and he crystallizes him in carbonite. Puts him in a state of suspended animation. And Luke goes to try to save him and the princess. And as they fight, Darth Vader ends up telling him a secret that very few people knew. Darth Vader was his father. The Jedi Knight that he thought Darth Vader had killed, well, he had killed him, kind of. You know? This being who was the incarnated evil running around the galaxy, killing all the good guys, was his father. And here he was trying to beat him, and what Darth Vader is trying to do is coax him over onto the dark side. So this is really your path. This is really your destiny. I know, I'm your father. And here Luke's trying to kill him, and now he's got his own internal conflict that comes out to the surface. He'd been trying to do all this stuff for his father because he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. And now he finds his father's the one that he's been fighting, and that he thinks he needs to destroy his father now. And at the end of this movie, what ends up happening is, in fighting with Darth Vader, Luke's right hand gets cut off. And he loses his lightsaber. But he escapes. That is have the Empire Strikes Back. And that's where they leave us with that movie. Han Solo has been sold back to Jabba the Hutt, the Appetites. And the princess and the droids are safe, and Luke is safe, but his right hand is gone, and they make a little machine hand to replace it. And that's where we end up. Okay, now there's a little transition between these two movies here. Something happens to Luke. You know, he goes through some transformation and some growth. And now we're on to the third one, Return of the Jedi. How are we doing here? Listen. Each of these things is probably about an hour and a half long, so we're getting through 3 movies pretty quickly by comparison. Okay, now we're on to the Return of the Jedi, which suggests what's going to happen. We're going to have the Jedi Knights returning to save the universe. But we start back on that old planet again, Tatooine. So we got to go back to the desert planet where there's emptiness, back to his birthplace. He's got to go back to the beginning. And what he does is, old Luke goes back to where Jabba the Hutt. He goes down into the underworld where these disgusting, slimy creatures are that are controlling Han Solo, that reckless warrior who helped save them. And Luke has got a whole different attitude about him now. He's not cocky. He's very self-assured. He's very quiet. He carries a hidden power. He doesn't flash it out here. And again, to make a long story short, they end up killing Jabba the Hutt and saving all the good guys. Okay, so now Han Solo and Princess Leia and the 2 droids and Luke are all back working with the Resistance, and they have new plans for the new Death Star that's being built somewhere else. And they find out that the Emperor himself, not just Darth Vader, but the slimy Emperor himself, is there on the Death Star as they're building it. So they can get Darth Vader and the Emperor and the Death Star all in one shot if they really pool their forces and do a surprise attack. So this is where we're headed to the conclusion of having the whole rebellion burst in at light speed on the Death Star and do a surprise attack, but they find out it was a trap. It was a trap, and they were waiting for them, and so now we have this big battle going on, the dark side against the light side, and the light side is trying to escape. But we have a couple of aces up our sleeves. Let's see, which way should we go with this? They transport down on, there's a special defensive mechanism around this Death Star, and that special defensive ray is being projected from a base on a moon called the Moon of Endor. Moon of Endor. This one's important too. Now, so our heroes transport down onto that Moon of Endor to try to knock out that defensive mechanism so we can go in and kill the Death Star. Well, down on the Moon of Endor, we run into these cute little characters called Ewoks. Does anybody, you remember the Ewoks?
Yeah.
They're about this big, and they're like, yeah, the 7 dwarves, they're like little baby bears. They're all like little baby bears. Really cute, fuzzy, and, keep them talking. They live up in the trees in a very primitive forest. You find that after we've overcome the evil side of the animal nature, here you have the good side of the animal nature. And they're all together. Individually, they're just cute. All together, there's so many of them. I mean, they're just all over the place. So they get all of these Ewoks to help them try to overcome this defensive base. And while this is all happening, Luke Skywalker realizes that Darth Vader can feel his presence through the Force. All these initiate characters, they're real sensitive. They know these things are going on. So he realizes he's jeopardizing the mission. His mission is to go defeat the Emperor. He believes that his mission is to save Darth Vader. There's a little conversation that went on beforehand. Oh, I skipped a little space here. Stepping back, before we go to beat the new Death Star, Luke goes back to his teacher, Yoda, to complete his training. And at this point, Yoda is really old. He even says, you know, when 900 years old you are, this good you will not look. He's 900 years old, you know, he's got a lot of mileage on him. So he says his vehicle is going, and now he's going to be one with the Force. And he tells Luke, well, you've already done all the training that you need. He can feel that quality in Luke at this point, but there's one more test. He has to face Darth Vader. Only then will he become a Jedi. What Luke is trying to say is he's not going to kill Darth Vader, he's going to save him. He says, I can see the good in him. He was my father, and if he had good in him then, he's got it now, I see it. I'm going to coax him back over to the light side. So here you've got this young character who is going to face this one evil, incarnated evil entity and bring him back over onto the light side because he still sees good in him. That's what he believes his path is. Yoda and Ben think he's nuts. And they think that if he does that, he's sunk. But he goes and does it anyway. Cocky kind of guy that he is. And so you have this, he gives himself up. He just goes walking right into Darth Vader's hands, gives himself up. And they have this little conversation. He recognizes, yes, you're my father. And he's sitting there trying to coax Darth Vader onto the light side by saying, I can feel the conflict in you. It's like he turns everything around that Darth Vader had been saying to him, and he says it with confidence. But Darth Vader basically doesn't join him, and he brings him to the Emperor. So you have the Emperor and Darth Vader and Luke all up on the Death Star now. They're all floating up here on the Death Star, where the other good guys are down here on the moon of Endor trying to get rid of the defensive shield so that the rebellion out here can get in and destroy the bad guys. Got the picture? This is probably one of the best scenes you'll ever see in any movie about the forces of light and dark facing one another. What Luke does with the Emperor and Darth Vader up on that Death Star. Now down here, to make a long story short, these guys do end up knocking out the defensive mechanism. And the good guys always win in the end here. So they do that with the help of the Ewoks. But up here on Death Star, what Luke just walks right into it. He's determined not to use hatred or anger or evil or any of the negative qualities in him in order to beat the Emperor. He's not going to strike out. He's determined not to fight because he knows that if he does that the way he did back in that test, that he'll lose. And the Emperor just coaxes him along. This is where you see the real slimy side, the real evil side. He keeps on telling him, use your anger. Look at all your friends out there. They're all being killed. We knew you guys were coming. You know, this is hopeless. This is your real destiny, to take your father's place by my side and rule the galaxy, to create order out of confusion, rule over other people. So he's putting out all these little arguments and showing him that what he's been trying to do is absolutely hopeless. And he just keeps on trying to, even suggesting to him, he can read his thoughts. The Emperor can read his thoughts, read his feelings. He says, yes, I can feel the anger growing in you. Every time you step along that path, you come closer and closer to being my apprentice. Every time you feed the anger in you, you move another step along the dark path. And he keeps on encouraging him to take out his lightsaber and strike me down. Remember that line. And finally, Luke just can't hold it back. He's going down in there, he takes his lightsaber out. Oh, but he and Darth Vader get into a fight. And you have the Emperor just coaxing them on, just loving both of them being evil and hating each other and using that kind of destructive force.
Didn't the Emperor start attacking Luke first and...
No, that only happens later. The Emperor didn't start attacking Luke. The Emperor just kind of sat there on his chair, hanging out, throwing thoughts out that would bring the hatred or any of the dark stuff that was in Luke out, because he knew that was the only way to defeat it. That's the biggest point. And Luke knew that the only way he could defeat the Emperor was to not let the dark side of himself take over and motivate him. So here we got Darth Vader and Luke fighting back and forth, and Darth Vader is starting to read Luke's thoughts because he's not controlling himself now. All this stuff is coming out, and all of a sudden he finds out from Luke's thoughts that Leia was Luke's sister. Okay? And we had learned this a little bit earlier. I didn't mention it to you. Leia was Luke's sister, and so Darth Vader says, well, if you won't join the dark side, then maybe she will. That really gets Luke pissed off. Oh, he's not going to go after my sister. I've been trying to save her all along. And that was his whole thing, this thing. So he ends up beating Darth Vader. When he gets that anger going back in, and using the anger and the hatred, he cuts off Darth Vader's right hand. And he sees that it was just a machine. So you have this moment here where the anger took over, he beat Darth Vader, and he's looking at Darth Vader's hand laying there on the ground. He's not dead yet. Darth Vader's not dead yet. He's just laying there. His hand is a machine, and Luke is looking at his own hand that's a machine, and he realizes if I keep on going along this path, I'm just going to become another Darth Vader. And the Emperor, he loves it. He says, oh yes, I've got him now. Yes, that's it. Kill your father and take your rightful place at my side. And Luke, he's cool. Says no. He throws his lightsaber away, and he just turns and he says, I'll never follow the dark path. And he, even at this point, this is a big one, he says, I am a Jedi like my father before me. Even at this point, he still sees that the essential part of Darth Vader is good. He believes in that, despite all the evidence. And he just lets the Emperor try to kill him. Doesn't do anything to defend himself. Another self-sacrifice here.
Darth Vader's mask.
Not yet. It's still on there, okay? So here we have Darth Vader on the floor, just been beaten. The Emperor is sending out electricity, just the evil force, killing Luke. And Luke is screaming out, asking his father to help him. He's trying to call the good out of his father. And Darth Vader stands up and he picks up the Emperor and he throws him down a big shaft and kills the Emperor. Ta-da! It's a real big point there. What Luke has done is he uses the power of love, forgiveness, and the ability to see that good in Darth Vader and to call it out so that Darth Vader saves himself. And Luke tries to save Darth Vader, and in the end, he's dragging him toward the spaceship in order to get him off the Death Star. And Darth Vader knows he's not going to make it. He asks Luke to take off my mask so that I can see you with my own eyes. He had a mask on before that helped him to breathe, helped him to see. But he says, please take off my mask so that I can see you with my own eyes. And seeing it in the movie is great. Reading it in the script, the little book that you can actually buy at a bookstore, to hear the thoughts that went on inside of Darth Vader's mind and inside of Luke's mind during that little scene is tremendous. Darth Vader is afraid of whether he'll be accepted or not by Luke, his son. And all that fear, and yet all he sees is compassion and love coming from Luke's eyes, and he comes to realize, my God, this kid has actually saved me. He has a power that goes so far beyond what I had learned about power being on the dark side. So it shows the difference that the power of love reaches inside of people and motivates them in a way that the power of fear cannot do. And in the end, what you see is the images of Yoda and old Ben and Anakin Skywalker that had been Luke's father, all together, kind of like shining beings, being one with the Force And the Ewoks are having a party, and everybody's happy, and Luke's a Jedi Knight, and the good guys win in the end. Ta-da!
So there's a book, you just mentioned the book, is that a book that explains all this?
No, the book is just the scripts themselves. It's like in story form for kids of each of the three. There are three different books. They have pictures in there from the movie, but it doesn't talk about the significance of any of it at all. It just has the script and the storyline.
You didn't mention about taking the mask off.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah, well, he asked him to take the mask off, and he does. You see the face that had been all battered and beaten. But in looking at the movie, you can feel what happens in the exchange between the two of them. Oh, that's right. What he said was, what Luke kept trying to say was, I want to save you. And what Darth Vader said was, you already have. Ta-da. Now, this is your dream. Anybody here ever have epic dreams? All of this kind of stuff goes on. Reading through here, you're going to find the character transformation that each of these different characters goes through. You see certain characters relating to the pillar of force, certain characters relating to the pillar of form, and certain characters relating to the central pillar. Have you gotten to talking about the Kabbalah yet?
Just briefly last night.
Okay. Well, I think Paul's going to come back and work with that tonight. And you'll see basically the different stages of growth that are related to on the Kabbalistic tree embodied by these people. It's bringing those principles to life in the form of characters. Yeah.
Since you brought up Obi-Wan, could Kenobi be Obi-Wan?
Excellent. So you have the self-sacrifice in each one, and every time that sacrifice was made, you had something that was powerful on one level, moving to a whole different and greater level of power and influence. So I guess we better stop there. People have been talking for